You are a super creative person and always wanted to go into the world of film, then this podcast, The Reality of Hollywood, is just for you. We are talking about all the things business related, how to keep your mental health, but also how to keep your creative mindset. And today with special guest, director Viktorija Razevska. You don't want to miss that. My lovely people, we are back in the building, a new episode of The Reality of Hollywood, and I'm so happy to have her here because I didn't know if she could make it because she just shot 2 movies back to back, guys. You don't believe it. I was like, this is insane, but she made it happen, obviously. And here she is, director Viktorija Razevska.
Hi, Ben.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh my God, you're here. I can't believe it.
I know, I had to put off all my things just to get here.
But you look fresh. You look like animated. You did it. I mean, you shot 2 movies back to back.
Yeah.
This is crazy. How did you do it? I mean, how did you pull that off?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's a great question. I mean, I would probably say in the future, I'd rather not shoot 2 films back to back.
Right.
It seemed to not bother anyone else, but I feel like as a director, kind of going from one creative pot to another creative pot was this like I had to be almost schizophrenic.
Right.
You know, I was just like, oh, now this is the feeling. What are we doing here? Here's the visual language. Go over here. Completely different. Now we're over here. You know, so I guess all my answer would be is that I was lucky enough to have like a month and a half of prep, and that's all I did was dedicate my time to that.
It's interesting that you say that because we always talk about it, right? This is one of the phrases in Hollywood that we always talk about: preparation meets opportunity, right? Which is so true, right?
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about those projects in a second anyway. But before, I would definitely love to go more into detail, like your beginnings, where you're from originally, you know, and how you got into like film at the end, and why did you get into film? What was so special about film for you?
Oh man. So I would probably say film for me has been a life. It's been a lifelong journey. You know, you go back to when you're small and the way you act and the way you like regard the world. For me, it was always 100% in this very visual space. I spent most of my life being homeschooled. I was homeschooled because I was a figure skater. But aside from that, I don't. It's more about that I had a lot of opportunity to spend a lot of time with my parents. My father's an artist, and so I got to have this like really beautiful kind of creative childhood where, while my little job of figure skating, in the meantime, I got to come home and I got to read all of these books, you know, do all of this creative artwork in addition to the things you're supposed to learn. I didn't not learn anything else, but you know, all of that.
I'm with you on that.
But I guess I was always fascinated with with art house film. I grew up in a household where my parents loved art film. My favorite movie growing up was Tarkovsky's Stalker, which if you have anyone has watched that, it's an epic journey. Every time I watch it, have you seen it? Actually,
I have not. Oh my God!
Okay,
shame on me.
Yeah, I should have probably told you to watch it in advance. But it'll take like, it feels like it's about a 3-hour long movie, which is long, and it's if you've ever, have you seen anything of Béla Tarr? He's a Hungarian director.
The name sounds very familiar, though.
Yeah, well, he's known, both Tarkovsky and him are known for these really long shots. You know, you just really sit in the scene, and you're there, and you're there. Béla Tarr's can go on for like 20 minutes. Right. Which is really more about what it makes the audience feel, rather than like, oh, we're supposed to be getting a bunch of information from this shot, even though you are. But, you know, anyway, I digress, but Stalker was one of those films that I felt like every time I watched it, like when I was younger, it was this whole like resistance, you know, how can I sit through this film? Is this boring? But it's not boring because I'm like going through this journey. But, you know, with my father, it was just really magical. And I got to have these really cool experiences watching like art house film. And then on the side, just like a ton of anime. I feel like my visual, like I didn't watch a lot of normal films, I guess, growing up that everyone grows up with, like Indiana Jones. I mean, we did watch maybe one of those, but that's what my childhood was. But,
I just wanted to ask you. You said your dad is an artist.
Yeah.
So what kind of artistic work is your dad doing? And just to get a feeling for it.
Oh yeah. So I should ask my dad exactly what he would call himself, but I feel like the easiest way to represent him is mixed media. So he basically he works in photography. He'll take a photograph and then he'll paint over it. Or he'll paint something and then he'll put a bunch of like collage artwork. Either it's very minuscule or very large, or like he'll use like random technology. Like when I was growing up, we used to sometimes go to like FedEx where they have photocopy printers and they think, everyone's there like just scanning their regular job stuff. But we would be there and my dad would be like, okay, we're going to try this thing. We're going to maybe while it's scanning the item, we're going to move it all around. And he would make all of this like wild, interesting artwork. And it was always about like, what can we discover around the place? Like right now, if I had a bunch of, they're called gels. You put over like a light. You change the color like a filter gel. Sure. I had like a bunch of small like what do you call them? Like tester. Where you're just you can see the color of them. And I gave a bunch of them to him. He takes it all apart, made all of this random artwork with it. So he just like sees something that it's normally used for this, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to now use it for this.
That's awesome. So very also like in a way experimental a little bit.
Yeah,
too. Like
super experimental.
I feel like he's a guy that he has this vision. He sees certain things, and he's able to combine it in his head to create something completely new.
Yeah.
That's an art. That's awesome. I think that's something that not a lot of people have. This kind of like mindset of just seeing something already before it's been done.
Yeah.
Which is also part of film at the end of the day, right? And I really wanted to talk to you about that very quickly. You just mentioned that. So you watched certain films in your life back in the day. So, and when you sat down and you watched those films, and you were still like a kid or teenager, right, back in the day at that point. So how do you think about it today? What did it change within yourself that you felt like, hey, you know what? I want to create film too. I feel like I have something within me that needs to come out. So what
was
is that?
Well, I guess I could then continue the story that kind of brings that in. So I ended up going to university and I majored in philosophy.
Really?
I didn't go to film school.
Nice.
I mean, I get why some people say philosophy, like, oh, what are you going to do with that? But honestly, it couldn't have been a better thing for me. It was, it's just so great to like learn not only to critically think about your world, but to think about things holistically and about what can you want to find the question before you find the answer. And so there's a lot of like, what is the question? What can we discover here? So I was lucky enough at my university that they let me do my final thesis paper as a script. And I knew nothing about scripts. And in some ways, when I think back on it, I'm like, why would I even do that? But I
ask myself every day.
But I was just like, I'm going to do this. And I think it's ultimately what I realize now. I think overall getting to know myself better as a person is that I am a very much visual person first rather than linguistic person. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time being like, oh, we're thinking a thought, then we visualize it. I start opposite, and maybe that's actually a lot of people's experience, but I start opposite, very visual, and then I drill down with what the verbal version of that is. So I guess to answer that is that I felt like through my childhood and the way I was trying to figure out what I was supposed to become, when you're 18, 19 years old and you're doing all of that nonsense, and then choosing philosophy, but writing that paper, it kind of felt like, oh, film is kind of the culmination of being a philosopher, because a philosopher is not just a storyteller. They're someone who like thinks about the world, not just critically, but imaginatively, artistically. It's so broad. And so I felt like, well, if let's say I was actually going to become a philosopher and like drill down onto something specific and write manuscripts for it, well, actually mine is in the visual, the storyteller space of philosophy. And so I just feel like it was a natural progression. which I think about it now. But in retrospect, I wrote that script and then I used it before I graduated, just to apply to production companies in LA. And that's where I got my first internship, which is super random, but
that's so awesome that you just say that, because a lot of people that I'm talking to, right, even from Europe, from all around the world, always asking me, so Ben, how did you come to LA, and how did you make it all work? How did you connect yourself with people? So coming back to what you just said, so you just came from university, you had the chance to just write a script to express yourself on paper, and you used that script and send it out to production companies in LA.
Yeah.
And someone responded to you and said, hey, you know what? We like that. We want to invite you for an internship. Is that what you... That's how it was.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's just awesome. Because that shows me, if you wouldn't have done that, if you wouldn't have wrote down your ideas and your vision that you have and believed in it, and you would have never sent it off, you might not would be in LA. Who knows? I'm always saying, if you don't take that chance and you don't know what's going to happen if you don't try, maybe your life could have changed so drastically, but a lot of people
really
just don't do it, What if? That's my question every day when I wake up, by the way. Every day when I wake up, I'm always asking, what if I do this, this, and this today? What could happen,
Yeah.
So
man.
No, seriously.
So philosophical.
I know, thank you.
My gosh.
I mean.
And then I started thinking about multi-dimension theory. Oh, gosh.
No, but honestly, I mean, I really have to tell you, that always keeps me or takes me back on track. That's also something I wanted to talk to you about in a second when it comes to mental health in this town, especially in this industry that we all know is not easy to not survive, is but you know what I mean. Let's keeping a balance is not easy to do in this industry. So, but coming back to what you said, so you send it off. You got a response, and they said, hey, you know what, we like it, and then you basically moved from your place where you were. Just tell me, where were you born and raised, by the way? And
so
then,
I grew up in Utah.
Right.
And I'm originally Latvian, which is a super small Eastern European country.
That's what people say. Where's your last name coming from?
Razevska. Well, Razevska, most people would say is Polish, which it is. But Latvia has been... we would say, as my grandmother would say, kind of like a stomping ground. Either the Russians are stomping this way or the Germans are stomping the other way, Right. And just throughout history. But Latvia is ultimately a very small, a tribal land. We have a very ancient Indo-European language.
Right.
And now I'm segueing from your point, which was...
So you're from Utah?
Pretty much from Utah.
That's where you also studied in this area? All right.
Actually, then... I ended up going when I was 17 to University of Miami in Florida.
Right.
And just mainly because I got a scholarship to go there.
Nice.
And so I kind of had Utah, where I had this kind of really great artistic experience living at home, being in the mountains, and then going to Miami because, and I'm so thrilled my parents had my back and supported me, because I needed to experience something completely opposite.
Right.
And so going there, it was totally different vibe.
Right.
A lot of learning about yourself.
Yeah.
And then, what I would say is then once I was thinking about what you just said about I just wrote this script and then I sent it out to people. But, even in some ways when I look back on it, I think I'm not sure I had a fallback option necessarily. And so I'm a big believer in trusting in your intuition and your gut, which for I think a lot of time is very difficult to discover it when you are in chaos and you're growing up. But that little inkling that you have, that I feel when I think back on it, is well, there was really no other option. And I didn't even think I'm going to work in the film industry. It was more I knew I wanted to make films, but I didn't know what that meant. I never saw myself being I'm going to be a Hollywood person.
Right.
Interesting. In that sense. And so, but when I look back on it, I think it was literally my mother was well, you better send it here to this place. And it was almost well, what else would I do?
Right.
And I don't think options are bad at all, but sometimes I feel there also is, when you really think about it, is there any other option you have to do?
Right.
And almost if it feels there's not, even though you're is this option even going to work? Then you probably need to do it.
It's honest. Thank you so much for raising that point, Juby. And honestly, I feel like a lot of people don't even think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, where I'm from and the people that I met in my life already, to be honest. So what's interesting is that when I made the decision, let me put it that way, when I decided, hey, I want to come to LA, I want to go into film, even early on, even from the very beginning, I just want to go into film. I want to become an actor. I want to create something on screen, on stage.
And was this when you were still back in Germany, or before you came here?
That was even before. That's a good question. That was even before I came to LA. I used to live in London a couple of years, right? You used to live in the UK.
Know that. Yeah.
But not even everyone asked me the question.
See, now.
So I'm British too, ladies and gentlemen.
Wait, everyone. All right, now we're asking you the questions. Okay, so you grew up in Germany, but then you lived in London. Okay.
I did, yeah. Oh my God, now people know my life. So yeah, I'm born and raised in Germany, around Berlin. That's where I was born. So I'm from the DDR, from the old German East Side.
Yeah.
So I'm the East, West Side German guy. So, but I grew up in West Germany, so I always had these two mentalities, and I'm more from an academic family. That means for us, doing something creative was more like a hobby.
Yeah.
It was more like, Ben, that's nice. That's very nice that you want to do that, but you know what that means, right?
Yeah.
You don't make money off of that.
No.
I said, really? And as a kid, as a teenager, you just want to make your family happy. So you just do what they want you to do. But then again, what you just said, you have to find out yourself who you are. And I think that brings me back to when I decided I wanted to go into acting and creating something from scratch, on screen, on stage. People, not everyone, but a lot of people looked at me and said, Ben, come, stop dreaming. Come on, please. The people in Hollywood do this stuff, but come on, you're one of us. I said, and I stopped. Really, I really had this moment where people even talked to me that way and said, Ben, don't worry about it. Just come with us. You're fine. And I felt like within me, no, that's not me. It is not me. And I think you have to accept who you are.
Yeah.
And you have to realize who you are. Even if that means that you're completely different than anyone else that you grew up with. That's totally fine. And I also wanted to say that to people out there. If you feel like maybe not alone, but you just feel like, oh my God, I'm the only one who thinks that way. I'm always saying, hey, that's totally fine. Because that's how you should be. That's how you were supposed to be. You just have to believe in it and move forward. And that's really something that I also did. And again, coming back to what you just said, I feel like finding yourself and really understanding, what if I would do that? What could I create? How could I change the world with something that I'm creating and people maybe watch at some point, And there was always something that I felt like, I think I have something that I want to give, I have something within me I want to have to come out,
Yeah.
But anyway, I hope that answers your question. Sorry, I don't want to talk too much about myself.
There's still a lot of questions I have to ask, but kind of you touched on the mental health aspect, and I really feel like after I did get to LA, and then I've been out here for about 8 years, then it's been like my way of trying to solve like the mental health problem is. For me, at least, is that you have to, and I feel like this was hard for me to really internalize, but be exactly who you are, which is what you were saying is like, if you're completely different, that's great. But there's something between like people telling you that and actually doing it and actually being singled out, and that's something that, especially in the last like couple years, that's something that I've been really working on embracing. Like every day I try to wear something interesting, something that breaks me constantly out of my own mold, like put on like different makeup every day. It's less about makeup, but more about me being like, I'm constantly feeding into this, I want to be different because of this way, and not to be necessarily rebellious against other people. But because of that is that helps my mental health. And the closer you feel to your regular self, I think actually the much easier it is to balance, the everyday stressors that we all deal with that doesn't help our mental health. But that's how, if you're close to yourself and you can do that, then it's much easier to manage, in my experience, rather than I spent time in my life where I was trying to definitely be someone else. And doing that, it just is like you wake up every day and it feels like a gigantic platter of stress and mental anxiety. that you can't deal with.
That's a very interesting point. I just wanted to ask you. So you just said you at some point wanted to be someone else.
Yeah.
So did you want to be someone else because people around you made you feel like you have to be someone else? Or did you even talk to yourself and feel like, I think I can't be that way. I have to be like everyone else. I can't just live like that because I would be so different.
Yeah.
What was that point when you felt like, hey, I just have to be someone else. I can't be myself. Well, why was that for you?
I think it was both of the conversations. One, first and foremost, I mean, I'd really love to then ask this question back to you as an actor, but choosing this lifestyle is the same thing, where you want to not only like maybe be successful, but make a living.
Yeah.
And so part of you is like constantly weighing, well, do I do this, which will maybe not get me jobs, or something like this, and I can't tell because I can't navigate it. The Hollywood industry is like, there's no paths. As much as people do want to say, I feel like there are paths, but it's kind of like actually every individual must navigate it on their own.
Totally.
But in there with what we've been talking about, like hopefully sticking to yourself. But I spent a lot of time thinking, well, if I'm good at some of these things, if I stick to that, then I probably will be successful. But it was drastically different than what I'm like intentionally meant to be doing. Just like doing, I don't even know. It could just be like, I could say starting out, when I started out, I was working in development at a studio.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there and being like, I'm not meant to be a filmmaker in the studio version of this. Like, I don't know how to explain that. And there's nothing against that. We need to have everyone in the places that they want to be, but I was always meant to be on set.
Right.
I was never meant to be the development person that hands it off to the set people. Like, I just was terribly unhappy.
Yeah.
Without realizing it. But then you're like, I'm going to get rid of this one job that's stable, that I'm like good at. People praise me for what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
To go work this chaotic, crazy job that has crazy hours, that is completely volatile,
right.
Difficult to figure out even how you get in.
Yeah.
And then once you're in, can change on a moment's notice.
Right.
I'm going to give it up for that. Ultimately, once again, for me, it ended up being, I can't stand my life any longer until I do that. But I understand people who end up staying in those places. So I would just say, I know how difficult it is to be, it's not just being brave, it's which I would never have called myself someone like that. But I really regard people who take those chances, that takes a lot of courage.
Totally. I think that's a good word, by the way. Courage. That's definitely the right word. And I'm always saying, like, I did the same thing, by the way. It's funny. I think maybe we didn't talk about that before, but I was working an office job in the UK too, because you have to pay the bills at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, I would like to direct this back
at you. Yeah. No, I definitely identify with that because, again, I also worked in an office, like 9 to 5 job, and it was okay. I made okay money, and people always thought, Ben, how can you just quit that? You make good money. How can you quit that job? And I come back to what you just said. I just felt, no, that isn't it. That's not my life. That is just not my life. There's more than that, And taking that risk, I'm always saying, and I totally understand where you're coming from. At some point, you just feel like I just have that one option. There's just one path. I like to do that, so I have to try it. I have to understand what if I'm doing that, So, and I did that too. But I'm always saying to people who are maybe working like in a 9 to 5 job still, and they're kind of scared, and I get it. I totally get that point. It's not like that. I'm always saying, guys, you just have to quit your job right away and just become an actor, and you're going to be successful tomorrow. I would never say something like that because, as you know better than I do, that's just not real.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen like that, And I'm always saying, though, is if you really want to become someone that you were supposed to be, and if that means you want to become a film industry person, like an actor, director, whatever you want to do, like producer, you can calculate your risk a little bit, because at the end of the day, if I'm really thinking about it, it comes down to that you have to make sure that you are kind of financially stable. Because if you really think about it, I truly believe the biggest risk that people always have at the very beginning, it is the money.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's the money. I don't want to talk about money every day, because it's not just about money in life, but we have to realize without money, we can't pay the bills. Without paying the bills, we don't have a roof over our heads and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we need money. I get that. But I'm always saying, if you have an idea what you would like to be, you can work towards that dream, which means, hey, if you really want to be that person, save up money. Just focus on that. Really save up money. Don't pay money for that. Don't buy this stuff. Just save your money, that you know, if I just want to stop that job right now for maybe a year or even 2 years, I can easily do it.
Yeah.
I can easily do it, and I can focus on my acting career, my directing career, whatever it's going to be. But I just feel like you're more like relaxed within yourself. And that helped me too, I have to say. So coming back to you, we're going back and forth, but I wanted to ask you that thing about the money thing, like, because for me personally, when I knew I wanted to do the acting route, I felt like, okay, I'm going to save up enough money that I feel like I can just come to LA relaxed, because I know I don't have to freak out that I'm going to sleep under a bridge in 2 months, or whatever. Seriously, that I'm homeless or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That really makes you more relaxed. And I like bridges, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to sleep under them. No, I love them. I love bridges, but I don't want to sleep under them. That's a different story. But anyway, but the thing is, but the thing is, and that's really what I felt like a lot of people don't think about. Just because you're thinking about money at the very beginning, that doesn't mean that you're just money related and you're just like money focusing. It's just because you just need that financial stability in order to work towards your creative dream, which is becoming an actor, actress, or director, whatever it is. But coming back to you, so how do you feel about that? Or how did you feel when you made the move, let's say, quitting your office job, let's say, and just becoming someone being on set, which I know is a completely different world, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? So, but how did you make that transition, and even money-wise? Because financially, I think that's also something not a lot of people talk about. So, how was that for you?
Well, I think it was definitely super messy. I
feel you.
But I think ultimately, though, and especially coming and being in this world, for me, it's never been necessarily about success, but it's about being able to constantly have the ability to create. Right. And that's a success for me. That's a big success. I just feel like it's so huge, So true. Sometimes even I'll watch like a quote unquote bad movie, and I'll always be after, I'm like, I'll always say this afterwards. I mean, but they finished a movie. Like, oh my God! Thank you for saying that. And like that's every movie I call a little miracle in and of itself. It's so true. And so I'm always just like, okay, well now I can talk maybe about this or that, but really I have so much admiration for every movie that gets made. For sure. But for me, it was I think what you said is like it's really about priorities, and I think there's something about not just sticking your toe in there, which I get it, but like just flinging yourself fully in there and having to like hold yourself up and trust yourself to do it, and that you have to make it work. There's something about that pushes you forward in a way that I think is different than if you like try to juggle 2 jobs. Once again, people have done that, and this is just my experience. Yeah. But I think for me is once I knew I was going to go to set, I from the get-go I've always wanted to be a director. It was like really important that I would eventually become to be a director, but first and foremost for me it was always about becoming a craftsman, someone who's skilled at this job and honoring the craft of being a filmmaker. Honoring the craft of being a filmmaker, I felt like to me was not just going out there and saying, I'm a director. Give me stuff and let me lead a whole film crew, especially for the role of director, in my opinion. You are the linchpin. You have to lead a whole crew of people to a successful end. And if you do not know your craft, in my opinion, you are failing the skill of directing. And so I spent like 7 years learning the craft of directing.
Yeah.
By honoring the whole craft of filmmaking,
Right.
working in many different roles. Like I worked as an AC, worked in grip, worked in electric. I spent most of my time producing, and I have the utmost respect for producers. And I think that this is kind of like the unsung hero job.
Yeah.
Being a producer, if I could give any advice to anyone, is be a producer before, if you really want to become a director, be a producer first, because there's something about bringing other people's visions to life,
right,
and having to also navigate the world of, at least in my world so far, it's been independent filmmaking. If you're lucky enough to work in a studio, maybe it's a bit easier, but I think that it was really important to just stick through the hard stuff, you know, like, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do every nitpicky, hard, difficult thing that I know ultimately I don't want to do. There's many fantastic, incredible producers that I'm so glad that I will hopefully in the future get to work with, and I have gotten to work with now being a director.
Right.
But that if you don't know what their role is, and ultimately the producer, I think, kind of knows everyone's role, a really like on the ground producer.
Yeah.
If you don't know that, then you don't know what you're asking of your crew. You don't know what your script and the type of shots, the type of anything that you want to execute as a director. If you do not do that,
right,
in my opinion, then you become a hollow shell.
Yeah.
Of the role.
I mean, 100% agree. That's so awesome that you say that. And by the way, I met you when you worked as a producer, even on set.
Yeah,
you were,
that's
I mean,
right.
you were everywhere, to be honest. No, seriously, you were just like, I saw you everywhere, which is great, because I truly believe what you just said. If you have challenges in life, and also when it comes to producing, which is not easy, you know, which is, I'm observing people. I did a couple of shorts myself because I always wanted to have the experience myself. How is it to create a whole film by yourself? Not just being the actor, but seeing it from the other perspective.
From like the page all the way to the end.
Oh my God. So I understand so much better right now what you're just talking about, you know? And I really believe that every actor should also do or like create their own short.
Yeah.
To really fully understand. That doesn't mean that it has to be like the most beautiful short ever. It's not about that. It's just about the different skill sets that every position brings to the table. If you know that as an actor, that makes you even stronger on set as an actor. I truly believe that.
So much stronger on set.
It's all about, it's funny we talk about, because I remember when we did the movie Glassly Dark, for example.
Glass Darkly, yes.
Glass Darkly, my
But
son.
I like Glassly Dark, that works.
Glass Darkly, my God, what's wrong with me? But the thing is, when we did that movie, I really felt that, though. There was kind of a dynamic, you know. There was kind of an interaction that we all had. So I really appreciated that, which I believe is something that you can see on screen at the end of the day.
I believe that as well.
And that's also coming from a directing perspective. I feel like if a director has the experience of all these different positions, they bring so much more to the table, which then, again, transitions to the screen, too, which you can see at the audience at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
I think... I totally agree with you. There is a dynamic
For sure.
that when you are on set, that feeling that you get, that when you're on set all the time, like they're always different, because every film is drastically different than one another, that I believe that translates to the screen. For sure.
And by the way, I also want to talk more about the business side of things too, but then also coming more about your work on set as a director. I think that's really something I would like to talk about. But we just kind of touched on that a little bit, which I think is kind of a critical thing too, which is, let's say you are a very creative person, right? Let's say we are creative people. We just want to build something from scratch. We have this idea, and we are in Los Angeles, the mecca, right, of Hollywood, and where you can make stuff happen and make a dream a reality and all this kind of thing. But I'm always thinking, how much would you say do you have to also please the business side, the commercial side, which is a very big word? It has to be kind of commercial in order to be sold to the audience, because if you can sell something, then you have a chance to maybe work on your next project too. So it's this kind of snowball effect, right, that we all kind of know about. And most of the time when I'm talking to creative people might say, I know, but, you know, I don't really like it because I just want to be free. I want to be independent, which I totally understand, which I'm the same way, right? But I'm always thinking, like, if you want to pursue your career and you want to go up the ladder and you want to go to the next level, how much would you say you have to kind of admit and commit to the business side of the industry as well?
Well, I think about it in two ways.
Yeah.
I definitely think. Well, I'll start with my mentality overall about that thought is, and I'll bring in on the side just to kind of like work on my own abilities. I have a side art series called A Study in Discovery.
Nice.
That where I basically choose a slew of limitations, meaning like. Well, obviously most of the time the limitation is I don't have any money, but, or I only have one location and I only have this thing, but what are the things that I do have?
Yeah.
And then I create like anywhere from 2 to 5 minute piece. That's like, also an art test. Like this is also a ground where I test things. I bring that up mainly because I wanted to create that series is the more you practice with utilizing limitations, meaning whether creative limitations, these are things that are creatively limiting what I can do on film right now. Yeah. If I want to do this thing, I obviously can't like ride a dragon in here, but maybe I can figure out a way, something like that. But accepting limitations oftentimes fosters immense creativity. So that goes into my second point is that when I think about working in the business side of things, I usually try to always switch my mindset is like, is this another study in discovery? Is this another, here are my limitations. Here's what I want. How can I creatively solve to get the best end product? Yeah. And so I think of it as like accepting your parameters and your limitations. Right. Which doesn't necessarily hinder your creative being and your free feeling. It actually enhances it or diverts it or creates new spaces or just helps you discover new things that you never discovered before. So I guess more practically, I would say ultimately it is a business. If we were all like maybe my father, just like artists and have the point is to be completely executing your own art at will. Yeah. That would be one thing, but this is the most collaborative art. Film is something where I cannot go out there to execute my fullest free thing with, unfortunately, probably like without 30 to 50 people. And that's not unfortunate. That's actually amazing. Yeah. And so when I start my sets, I always start out with, thank you for everyone being here. You are all creative collaborators, down to the PA, down to the key grip, because what you do, what you execute, the passion you feel in this moment will translate. I guarantee you will translate to the screen on film. Yeah. It will. For sure. And so when I think about commercials or things like that, I mean, it's definitely sometimes difficult when you're navigating difference in creative things, like thoughts, I guess, when you're just executing someone else's thing. But that's, I kind of feel like, well, for me, I always try to go to that, here are my parameters. Right. I am not being limited. This is just pushing the creativity in a new space. Yeah, for sure. And also accepting that you know what job you're on. Yeah. So sometimes, like on my last 2 films I just shot, I got to have a lot of creative freedom. Yeah. And in some ways, I feel like, I mean, this is just personally, I don't know if anyone else would say it, but I kind of bought that freedom through 8 years of hard work. Yeah. And because I knew that this is something I needed to get to. But I know, like, I was just doing a commercial. Yeah. And which I was very lucky to get to do. But it's not Viktorija's idea. It's the client has this. Yeah. And they have parameters. Right. And then, of course, the producer comes in and they have budget limitations. Yeah. And so then my idea could be the best idea in the entire world. But if it doesn't fit into either of those, then I'm ultimately not a good collaborator in creating what I would still say like a commercial is artwork, any film thing is a type of artwork. Yeah. I teach, I've taught in random places around the world, like in India and Ukraine, where I just lead little film groups. Oh, I remember, Yeah, and I'm just, these are like one-offs that I've done through a nonprofit where I just come in and I'm like, okay, here's how you work your camera. Here's how to kind of write a short story. Right. And most of them are just trying to get out, educational information. Yeah. But I try to tell them, and I feel like they've seen success doing it, is every piece, even if you're just talking about XYZ and it's actually boring. It's creative. It's an art piece.
Exactly.
Like, put that into it.
Yeah.
If you just do one little thing, that will help. So I guess in a very long-winded way,
I
kind of answer how I think about. I think that I guess what I would say ultimately is it's important, and that it shouldn't feel like resistance when you don't get to have your free personal self. It's that this job, I'm actually exceting the creative with these people. Oh, this job, it's just me. Great. But ultimately, it's never just you. But
no, it's true.
But I want to ask that back to you as an actor. I'm always, I grew up doing quite a few acting classes. I am not an actress. I actually am terribly uncomfortable in front of camera.
Did?
Yeah,
Ooh,
but only in the sense because I always know that I wanted to be a director, and I always want the craft of it. But the what is it about when you as an actor you have the role, you see it on the script page, you have the director's thoughts, and then you also have your internal self. Like, what does it mean in that creative space? Like, does it always feel like limitations, or does it feel like no, this is how I like to channel my creativity?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. Thanks for asking that. I feel like, and also what you said, by the way, about yourself right now when it comes to the commercial side of things, because it feels like that you just wanted to answer or basically get back what you just said right now. I feel like that you're kind of able, which is great, by the way. I didn't know that about you, but you are able to kind of balance it out in a way that you kind of create your own world for yourself where you are able to have complete the freedom to just play with your creativity. But then at the end of the day, you are still kind of able to transition into any kind of job, let's say. If a commercial comes up, if a big studio feature film comes up, you are able to put yourself in there and just see it also from their perspective and give back to them what they are expecting right now. I think that's a kind of a chameleon almost. Like, you kind of get into any kind of situation and you just adapt to it, right? Which is great. So, and I feel like coming back to your question right now in acting, when I get a role and I get cast for something, and I usually read the script first, obviously, when I get the whole script. Sometimes you don't even get the whole script, right? I mean, you know how it is on audition. Sometimes you just get 2 pages or 3 pages, and you feel like, I don't know who this guy is. Because you don't have the backstory, you don't have anything, right? You just have this one little scene with, let's say, Maria, and Maria is angry about you, but I don't even know why she's angry about me. I was like, okay, all right. And I just have to be nice right now. How can I be nice when she's yelling at me? What the, okay. But, and you just basically try to still visualize kind of how you would react in this situation, even without knowing how this person is or who he really is. But then obviously when you get cast, and by the way, I also believe, which is interesting, you get cast based on your talent and how you kind of portray the character, right? But I also believe, and that's also something at the end when I'm finished, I would love to ask you too, from a directing perspective, also as a director, when you kind of choose your cast, how much of it is the look, and how much is pure the talent, even if the person doesn't look the part. But I come to that in a second, because I feel like it's a very critical question too. But I just want to answer. So let's say I have the role and I got cast and I'm happy and I'm trying to bring it all to the table. I mean, when I get the chance to have a conversation with the director first before we go on set, to really just talk about it a little bit, that for me doesn't mean that we talk about how I'm going to play it or how I'm going to portray it. I just want to know about his vision. I want to know about how he thinks about this character. Yeah. Because a lot of directors I was working with, they also wrote the script too. Yeah. Not everyone does that, as you know, right? Yeah. Sometimes you're just going to be called on set as a director and you just read the script a day ago or 2 days ago, right? But again,
ideally that never happens.
I know. But I'm just saying, so I usually have a conversation with the director and just really trying to get an idea of what he's thinking about. And then also we just having a normal conversation, to be honest, right? It's really getting more into depth and just really getting an idea of what it could be. But when I'm coming on set, I'm really trying to just give what I had in mind, to be honest.
So it feels like you have creative leeway within the world.
And that doesn't mean, and honestly, I don't want to make anyone feel like that I'm not respecting the director's opinion. That's not what it's about. For me, it's just about, I just want to give you now what I feel the character should do right now, how he should express himself on camera. That's what I feel the right thing to do right now. But then I think as an actor, like at least myself, I'm very open. So if I do the first or the second take and the director comes to me and said, hey, Ben, that was good.
Yeah.
But
let's try
the
this.
big but, I said, okay, damn, I didn't do it right. No, but
no,
I know what you mean. But the thing is, like, when the director comes to me and you feel like, you know what, can you give me a little bit more of that and a little more of that? I definitely adjust to it. I feel like that's part of what you should do. You know, that's part of the collaboration that you just mentioned.
That's, I think, it's the whole point, yeah.
And I thank you so much for saying that before. You said collaboration, and I think that's the key. It's not a one-man show, and I think a lot of people forget about that. It's not about ego. We don't. But we have to say, it brings me back to business. There are a lot of egos out there.
So many,
you know?
Yeah. So it's hard to navigate.
I don't want to sound negative, but it's a fact. So if people out there, if you're just watching it right now, I really want to tell you there are egos out there. So you have to make sure that you just keep true to yourself and just stay true to yourself, right? That's the key thing for me always. So, and that's why I'm saying, like, if I bring something to the table, that's me thinking about it. You know, but if you as a director feel like, hey, that's already great, but I like to have kind of a twist here and there and we can just work on something, I'm all for it. Yeah. And I think that's the key. You have to be open for it, you know, which doesn't mean that the director now is completely damaging my vision of how I see the character. That's not what it is, because at the end of the day, again, it's a team effort.
Yeah.
And that brings me back that I wanted to ask you, you know, coming back to what I already mentioned. So let's say you, I know, exactly.
Hey, Bridge.
But, like, you know, the thing is, what I really like what you also said about, like, we talked a little bit about casting and, you know, having the right guy, the right, you know, whatever it is for the role. So let's say if you have someone, right, let's say you are also responsible for the casting, right, from the very beginning, and you see a lot of people on camera. They send you a self-tape, because now we live in a world of self-tapes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the biggest fan, but, you know, you got to do it, right? So, but anyway, so let's say you get a lot of self-tapes and you just see that one guy, right? Let's just as an example. You see this one guy and you feel like, wow, he looks exactly like the part. He looks exactly how I want it, right? But you feel like, acting-wise, I mean, he's okay, but there's something missing for you. You can't even describe what it is, but let's say there's something missing, but he still looks the part. And then on the other hand, you have someone who maybe doesn't look the part at all, but you like the acting so much. How would you choose? How do you decide who you're going to cast at the end of the day? I feel like a lot of people struggle with that sometimes.
Yeah.
Even as an actor, thinking, man, I feel like I'm the part. A lot of actor friends think, man, I nailed it. I think I got it. Never heard back. You know? So how do you decide from a directing perspective?
Well, I would say from a director's standpoint.
Yeah.
What I would say, and I don't know, maybe they already do this, like on really big sets, you know, giant sets. But I really feel like it's almost like if you're working with a casting director or if you're the director choosing it, and I would say this to actors, is if there's possible, know the director. Because I would say for me, I'm 100% the director. One, and maybe this is other directors, but I would say, okay, let's say you guys are sending in a self-tape for Viktorija film. Yeah. And, you know, maybe you know it's me. I, in general, will always reward someone taking a chance. Or at minimum, if we're calling it reward, meaning like if I'm looking at 100 people and 4 people took a chance, I bet those 4 people will be in my top list.
Took a chance in terms of what? What do you mean by?
Meaning there's that feeling where you really went all in. Like you see the script, like the sides. Like I sent out sides for my last script. Everyone reads it in the way that they feel like the script, the sides tell you to read it, which I also understand. And this is why I'm saying know your director, because there are probably other directors who would not reward this. Yeah. But for someone like me, if you read it in any other way different, if you change the cadence, if you change the volume level, someone said that they were yelling there, but you actually whispered it. If you used a prop, you know, one of my last films, I have a whole tape scene. Right. And out of a lot of the auditions I got, very few of them actually used real tape to put on their mouths. Right. For the young woman who was playing Beatrice. But, you know, and so it felt like No, you don't need to. I'm the director who loves seeing the tactile, even if it makes your self-tape messy. I don't care, because I feel like I'm seeing you navigate your way through the words and the script in the way that it's meant to be on film, which is not just you standing there and saying it, or maybe kind of having some sort of gestures. I'm seeing you actually in a self-tape navigate your way on film through the piece. How could I ever expect you? You haven't spoken to me yet. You don't know anything about the script. So all you can do is take a chance, in my opinion. And if you take a chance, that also shows to me range. That shows to me your commitment in not being afraid to try something. Yeah. Because I'm also a director who will ask you or people to do something that may be actually completely different. Right. Which, requires an actor to be okay with that. And that's okay. Actors will probably naturally work with me because I'm a bit more fluid, rather than this is the exact thing. Yeah. But I guess the other point is that I would say I 100%, like, let's say one of the short film I did write myself, I had a very specific casting type when I wrote it. Yeah. Ultimately, I ended up casting completely different people. They all look not only drastically different, I just ended up going with a gut feeling. This person to me feels like Thomas. This person to me feels like Surya. They don't look anything like him. Right. But I'm ultimately, what I find difficult in the casting process is I'm looking for a feeling. I'm looking for someone who's genuinely feeling this role. Right. Rather than the look. Right. And I mean, I'm a director who cast someone who originally in my head probably that would have not been on the docket. But, even like with you, like I had a role that was meant for basically like a 60-plus-year-old man. Right. And he wasn't able to make it on set last minute. Right. And so I had to, for me, it was more about, who can I trust acting-wise? Interesting. Okay, well, now I'm going to navigate. I'm going to have to make adjustments with the script a little bit to bring it down to someone who's a younger age. And then with camera stuff, like age you up a little bit to have that, to get us to that place. And I feel much more comfortable doing that than not having a connection with the actor. Right. I would much rather be like, I have a connection with the actor. Okay, great. Right. Everything else can be modified. Interesting. In some ways. But that's me. And so that's why I would say also to anyone who did want to be cast in my films or whatever in the future, has almost, I would say, nothing to do with you necessarily. Right. I would say also it is, I know a lot of people say, like, look-wise, there's nothing you can do to change that. If they're looking for a look, that's... Yeah, mom and dad did that. Done. Yeah, like, you can't change anything with that. Too late. But, I do feel like... and also I feel like you can't lose even if you went all in. Yeah. And the director didn't choose you. Yeah. Like, that's okay. Yeah. And but I know how difficult it is. I really feel for actors. And, like, as I go through the process, I could... Especially when I was cutting it down to, like, my top people, you really could feel like these are all incredible people. Yeah. And it's more of, like, what is going to best self-serve the film? Right. Less actually about my ego or less about anyone else's ego. You almost have to think of the film as its entity. Exactly. And then I'm going to fill that in. But I know that it's hard to... I think that's where the film industry is going more now. But in the past, I know, it's like... weird, scary, high-level exec producer who's cherry-picking people based on looks, and then they get in and everyone else is locked out, and then it's like this weird navigation. I think it's getting a lot more freeform. For sure. I mean, thank you so much. I really appreciate what you just said, because it basically, when you are an actor and you just do an audition, I feel like a lot of actors, even myself at the very beginning when I started out, I always wanted to make it right. Because what you do as an actor, subconsciously what you do is you kind of visualize what the director or the casting director might want to see. And you just try to kind of customize it almost the way that they want you to be, seen at or whatever. Yeah. Right? And I'm always feeling like today, I think you have to take risk as an actor, like in the audition process already, because the competition is so hard. I realized at some point I was trying to put myself into a casting director's shoes, and I was like, wait a minute. I'm one of maybe
thousands of people, thousands. And I mean, especially in LA, we had thousands of people. I went to an audition like a couple of months back, even prior to COVID. And I'm not lying to you, it was crazy what happened. I went into the casting, like the meeting room, right? The waiting room. And it was an audition for like a 35-year-old guy, whatever, like my hair, like light eyes and blah, blah, blah. So I went in, and I'm not kidding. I walked in and 20 guys sitting there looking exactly like myself. I'm not kidding. I was looking at this one guy, I was like, man, you could be my brother right now. You look exactly like I do. Same height, dark hair, light eyes, same face structure with a little beard. I was like, damn, how can you decide? You know what I mean? How can you decide over, coming back to the look? The look doesn't even mean anything anymore because we all look the same anyway, right?
Yeah.
And that, at the end of the day, it came down that I really tried to just be completely different. I did the complete opposite of what they might expect me to do. And also what I'm always saying is I feel like actors tend to be very connected to every audition. And I'm still doing that sometimes. Sometimes I'm really like catching myself, be like, oh my God, man, just calm down, relax a little bit, right? Just let go. And that's what I needed to learn for myself. Matthew and I last week, we talked about that too. I feel as an actor, you just can't make this one audition your whole life. Yeah. It's not that this is not your whole life here right now. So don't get like upset if you feel like it didn't work out. Just let go and move on with life. And that's also something I wanted to ask you, coming back to mental health, right? I feel like we are creative people and we want to be creative and that's our passion. But at the end of the day, we also have to understand that there's also something else in life. And I think you have to keep the balance of relationships, like in your private life, family, people you love people who love you. Yeah. You have to have a balance. And I did that wrong. I have to tell you, like, honestly, when I came out and I started in acting, I was so focused, like 100%, I got to get this down. I don't care about the rest. I'm going to be the guy, you know? And at some point, I just stopped, really, and it was like, what am I doing here? Really, I really had this moment where I felt like, I'm going to be really, like, miserable. I'm going to feel very miserable at the end of the day with my whole life because it's not just about that, you know? And I don't know how you feel. Is that something that you also had to work on at some point, realizing, hey, I got to take a step back and just relax a little more. You know, even if this is not going to work out, I'm still a great person. I'm still a good person. I'm not like a bad person just because this is not working right now.
Yeah.
You know, does that make sense what I'm saying?
I think that kind of goes in line what I was mentioned earlier about I had to redefine what was success for me. Which is that, and and that also I feel like takes the pressure off, allows you to actually like execute in the moment. Totally. Because if you are constantly like, if I were to sit here and be like, oh my gosh, I haven't directed or won an Oscar yet or something crazy like that, it's I feel like, wow, I'm once again doing a disservice to the craft, the skill of filmmaking, which is not about that end goal. It's about continually being able to execute. And execute meaning whatever section you are in the film world, whether you're holistically learning it, which I did for a lot of years, or whatever, you've chosen your path, then that means honoring it and meaning like, okay, I do this here, but also, I mean, I even feel like I talk to a bunch of actors, is that you can sometimes tell in actors who have only been actors and have never lived a real life. I feel like in some ways you can see that in the acting. Yeah. Because, and even though I would also ask, I firmly believe that acting comes from an imagination space, tying in real events, but also both. But I feel like in some ways, it doesn't necessarily matter on age, you know, but also you have to live your own life. You have to, you know, climb up a fence and fall down it. And I'm just referencing my own life, you know, like,
you did that?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I have as many, I used to be so like, why are you this person who has so many terribly embarrassing moments? And now I'm like, oh, well, thank goodness I got to live this life, you know, that I think makes me a better director because I got to be terribly embarrassed all the time.
Yeah. I jumped off the roof of a supermarket, if you want to know. I almost broke my leg.
How did you, where was
I don't know how I did it.
Where was your planning on landing?
And we just wanted to have fun.
Yeah, but, just down on the ground. You weren't trying to jump in a trash bin?
No, nothing. It was just the bare ground. Well, but I was young and innocent, so...
I just did it.
Yeah, that was like
but
last
it was
year.
okay. But
yeah.
I still have my legs. I can walk, so I was glad. But it really hurt.
I bet it
but
did.
It was crazy. It was actually a little higher than I thought it was. But, anyway.
Well, I feel one time I was telling I was climbing a fence, and I was
right.
climbing a fence, and it was like outside this golf course, but there was like this big house party, and I climbed outside this fence, but I was wearing a dress like an idiot, and it was one of those barbed wire fences, and it caught on the back of my dress, and it was like a literal perfect movie where once I jumped down, the dress came right off.
You're kidding.
Yeah, and it was perfect because it just like it couldn't have been more seamless in some ways.
So you stood there
with just my underwear on, and then I was like, well, this is useful. So I just feel like and sometimes I used to just be like, oh my gosh, this is haunting me, and now I'm like, well, welcome to the lineup, embarrassing story. You're very useful, and it's just informative on but I feel like if you do not like actually live your life, like when you accept all those moments and those like terrible, beautiful, happy, incredible moments that like you get outside of your work experience or within your work experience, that only helps your work get better, and that helps your mental health.
Right.
Therefore, it is about the balance.
Exactly.
Ultimately.
I mean, I'm always saying, and thank you for saying that, I'm always saying your career is not defining who you are.
Yeah.
And that's very important, and I really have to say that out loud. It's not defining who you are, and I think so, even including myself, sometimes we forget about that because we kind of get wrapped up in this kind of world of entertainment and celebrities and red carpets here, and which is all, as we know, it's all an illusion.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. People, I don't want to destroy your dream, but it is an illusion. No, seriously, it is an illusion, right? We have to be honest.
Yeah.
What we just talking about, that's the reality. Like, we're talking about the things that happen before the movie comes out and what we have to go through in order to make it happen. Which brings me, I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you one last question, because talking about directing and talking about being on set, right? So for me personally, I always wanted to understand even more from a directing perspective. So how do you prepare yourself coming on set, creating, because for me as an actor, it's always about the environment. I want to have a good environment around myself that I can fully give what I have to give, right? So from a director's perspective, how do you create that environment for yourself coming on set? How do you do that? What's your process?
Well, I would say for me, I'm a very, I put a lot of stake into the pre-production process.
Right.
I am not Werner Herzog. Werner Herzog would say, you just show up and come up with the shot on its own, and if you're Werner Herzog, that's great for you. But not for me. I am very much someone, because my visuals come before the written part for me, technically means I'm I don't want to call myself slower, but it means that I storyboard the process like very meticulously. Every shot that I have is storyboarded by myself. That's really important for me to dream and visualize the film.
Right.
I always pre-visualize. I can feel everything within the film before I get there. There's a lot of directors who feel it afterwards. This is my process. But for me, I always have the pacing and the understanding and the way the film needs to look in at first like a dreamlike state, and then I put that down into specifics, and I do it for every single shot, every single setup, and that's just for me. And,
right.
And the reason why I also do that is that the more I'm very clear and clarified, the better I can get in front of things, and with my like a cinematographer, with anyone else who's on my team, they can then start seeing what is this going to happen, because that's where you get like on our last shoot, I had 2 very specific shots that required a very specific camera move.
Right.
If I didn't know about this and come up with the storyboards a month and a half in advance, we wouldn't know about it, and we wouldn't know to prep it. But basically, it starts out there. I spend a lot of time storyboarding, and then from there, once I've like culled down, like this is the shot for this scene, these are the shots for this section, I'll write out a shot list, and then that's when I bring in my director of photography, where then they talk about, I bring in their collaboration, and then usually then I go back in and I do it all over again. After taking the director of photography, and also I'll send it to my producer.
Right.
And with everyone's thoughts, then I'll hear them out and be like, oh, wow, that was such a great idea. I loved this shot, but what, my director of photography said about this really means I actually should make it this,
Right.
And so I just take all of that into account and I redo it again. And I know a lot of people like on our last set, they show up and I'm like, here 15 pages worth of a lot of information.
Right.
And it can be a little bit overwhelming because a lot of directors don't do that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's really important that everyone knows at least what we're trying to do, because the more you prepare in advance, then when you show up on set and stuff goes haywire.
Thank you.
That's when I'm like, of course, I'm comfortable. That's why I do the study and discovery. I can come up with a shot on the spot with the parameters that we have. But if you can prep first, then you have always something to fall back on. It doesn't mean you ignore the perfect thing. Like when we were on set and, I see something where I want you to do like kiss the tape on the floor.
I love kissing the tape.
Yeah. But something like that, that's something that you see there that I wouldn't then be like, well, that's not shot list and I'm not going to do it. I would never do that.
Right,
but
right.
you have, just by me already having the shot, opened up the ability to get these great things.
Yeah.
So I just feel like you have the baseline, because ultimately as a director, you owe it to your producers to know that you're going to have a strong finished film.
Yeah.
That's like ultimately like your job.
Yeah.
And you owe it to everyone else to know what you're making, because it's not their job to know, it's your job. And so as long as you have the baseline, you can always deviate from it.
Yeah.
But you have your baseline that you know is your finished film.
And would you also say that it actually helps you? Because we talked about that, right? You always have the unknown happening on set.
Always.
It always happens. I mean,
It's
there's never a film shoot where nothing happens like unpredictably. Like there's always something where you feel like, really? Really?
That's also the fascinating thing about film.
I know,
it's an
right?
enigma.
But would you say because of your preparation is so strong that you already kind of prepared even for the unknown? If something comes up, you feel like, okay, we had this storyboard, we had the shot list. Okay, we got to do this now, but it still works for what I had in mind. Okay, we can get it done.
Yeah.
So you kind of shift to the unknown, and you kind of still make it work what you had visualized, just in a different kind of way that works right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
That's exactly
Awesome.
it. And that's as long as like everyone else feels comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That's why it's important. I'm always very close with everyone else who works on set with me, but that
Right.
they're also okay with that.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. No,
yeah.
I really appreciate it. I mean, we're at the end of the show already.
Oh, I was going to ask you that question.
We just started, people. What is right? What's happening? But I just wanted to ask you very quickly, and also how people can find you. But if you can just briefly talk about the last 2 projects that you just shot.
Yeah.
What can we expect, and when do you want to release them, and where can we see them, and how, and when, and all the information that we need.
All the information. Let's see. First and foremost, you can find me on Instagram at Viktorija_Razevska. But I also have a website called studyinddiscovery.com where you can see some of my little studies in discovery. For these 2 films, one of them is called An Alien Proposal. The second one's called Persuasion, the one you were in.
Right.
And those ones I'm in the process of editing. One of them has already got its first draft done. And so I would expect them to be done by December. And I will be releasing those probably first on film festivals, but then they'll be up on my Vimeo, which probably be a studyinddiscovery.com as well.
I have a feeling you have to come back.
I think so too.
She has to come back. It's too short. I mean, it's crazy. You can't
This
even
is
talk
not
about.
I was going to ask you 10 things about how annoying is it to work with a director on set who
It's
casts
never.
you
It's
2
never
days before?
annoying to work with a director. It's always beautiful people. No, it is.
Very well said. Such the diplomat.
I know. I have to be. No,
You have to
no.
be.
Honestly, working with you was great. I mean, I just say I love kissing the tape. And you're going to see why, people.
Yeah.
Because that was a beautiful scene. But because that was the moment when you just came up with the idea, Ben, would you mind kissing the tape? And I was like, hell no, of course I will.
Yeah,
and
the
I
tape
just
is
did
on
it.
the floor, by the way.
and-
So you definitely want to be. Are you comfortable?
But it was a lovely tape.
It was.
It was a lovely tape. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it, and see you next time for sure.
Yeah,
Let me
thanks
know
for
when you're
having
done
me.
with the movies, and we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll bring them
Okay,
on.
set. Guys, I said it already. December, January, okay? But guys, thank you so much for watching again. My name is Benjamin Schnau. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Benjamin Schnau, SCHNAU, right? And see you next time. Keep it up. Follow your dreams. Have a good day, guys.